So we're focusing on equanimity, this quality of peace, and the relief of non-attachment, not being attached to what is arising and passing within and around us. That capacity to abide within it all, right? And not get so caught up in preference. And equanimity, there's that equal relationship there, right? We can relate to whatever is arising and passing equally. And whenever I say this, it often, frankly, sounds amazing and even impossible, right? How could we relate to anything that arises and passes equally? And how I understand this is that equanimity is a relationship that is rooted in and infused with wisdom. The equanimity knows that the nature of all conditioned phenomena is the same. It's all impermanent, unstable, and unreliable, not separate from conditions or context, not controllable. And equanimity knows that this is true of everything. Right? All of our feelings or thoughts, for example. So grief, a jealous thought, a moment of joy, fear, wanting, they're all of the same nature. None is better or worse than the other. And so equanimity knows this is true not just of my feelings and my thoughts, but of this body, of that tree or flower. The conversation that went really well, the one that went absolutely awful. It's true of our country, right? All impermanent, unreliable, not separate, equal in that way. And that really helps me because it doesn't mean that all of those things as they arise and pass feel the same in the mind, body, heart, or that we respond to all of them, each of them in the same way. But that I can have a relationship with all of that that has a clarity and peaceful knowing that their nature is actually the same. And this is why non-attachment is one of the translations of equanimity, because when we really know how things are, there's less attachment to needing to control and make things different, because we kind of know that that's a losing battle. Something that the meditation teacher, Jesse Macio Vega Frey, said during a recent retreat related to equanimity really stayed with me. He asked, how narrow a bandwidth does our peace and happiness depend on? Right? Just like, how narrow a bandwidth does your peace and happiness depend on? Can we only be peaceful when things are as we want them to be? Or when what's happening in here or out there feels just right? Because that's really almost never going to happen. And what if our peace and our happiness can be stable in here, regardless of the way the wind is blowing or what's coming and going? And that's this kind of peace beyond peace. And it's possible, but I just want to acknowledge, like, it's so hard. It's hard, period. And it's particularly hard in our world right now. So one thing that I really want to emphasize is that we want to be realistic with our expectations of ourselves. When the seas are rising and chopping and the waves are big as they are now for so many of us, we want that peace, right? We want the relief of equanimity. But often what that craving is that we just want the waves to stop. And that's not equanimity. Right? The waves are the waves. And equanimity is that peace, like Jay talked about, that duck meditation, right? Of the ducks on the water that are just like, woo, woo, right? As the waves come, we're not changing the waves. We're changing our relationship to the waves. As sometimes they're very calm and steady, and sometimes they're very intense and choppy. And so it's really hard when things are moving and changing in ways that are painful or scary. And it's hard because we are so conditioned to be caught in preference, right? We are just wired for preference, to be really attached to our beliefs and our likes and not likes, to trying to control how things are. And so the neutrality of equanimity, right, that neutrality can be an incredible relief, a coolness in the fires of life, but it can also feel really strange and even wrong, right? Like if I'm neutral and have this equal relationship and not attached to my preferences, not caught in the fire of it all, it can feel like we're doing something wrong. So the neutrality that we may crave can feel strange because it is not where we live most of the time. And it's certainly not what our culture pulls for when the waves come, right? Because what do we usually do? We try to change them or fight them or control them, or we give up, right? We numb out, we're gone. I don't even want to see the waves. I don't want to feel them. We disconnect. And so I want to encourage us all to notice that, to notice the way we resist being with things as they are, because resistance in the mind, body, heart is a great indication that we can slow down and get curious, right? Not to judge it, but learn from it. As Fabiola talked about in her talk, right? That moment when she received some uh, feedback or criticism from a friend, and she was like, oh, I'm really triggered. Like, I can't quite be with this in a stable way. This doesn't feel equal or okay. And that's great. It's really wonderful practice. And it's probably going to be our practice a lot, not just in the coming days and weeks and months, but probably for the rest of our lives. Because we can't force ourselves into equanimity. Because then we're like automatically attached to preference, right? We're saying that how things are in this moment with my reactivity, my resistance is not okay. I need to force myself into some other state. And that makes equanimity impossible. So I really am just encouraging us, one, to be really gentle with our expectations of ourselves. We can think about our intention as really moment to moment, not trying to feel equanimity with everything all at once and forever. And that how we're going to be practicing this is probably more noticing when we're not okay with how things are. And that's no problem. It's just resistance. And being with that really can be a doorway to equanimity. And so one example, years ago, I did a 3-day weekend focused on equanimity. And the phrase that we were invited to hold was, things are as they are. Things are as they are. So even if you're open to it, even for a moment, kind of hold that in your mind and heart. Things are as they are. And I don't know about you. I mean, maybe intellectually, there's a sense of like, yeah, that's true, of course. But what I experienced over those 3 days and what I kept hearing inside, I would kind of, okay, things are as they are. And I would just feel no, like, no, things are not as they are. And this is with big things, right? No, we have to fight, we have to change, we should make things better. And in terms of kind of what was in here, how I was, no, I should be more patient than I feel in this moment. I should be more mindful than I was yesterday in that conversation, right? And it felt like that phrase, things are as they are, if I really, really stayed with that, it was almost like falling off a cliff, like giving up all of who I am, all of this efforting and doing. And that didn't mean I was doing the practice wrong or doing equanimity wrong, right? It just was like, I really have to see this. I have to see how much my system resists how things are in here and out there by trying to control it. That's what happens for me when things feel like too much. And for you, you may have some version of that energy, or when things feel too much, maybe again, your system disconnects or numbs or becomes indifferent. And we all have a little bit of both. And so, yes, equanimity is a factor of awakening, but it helps me to remember it's also a Brahmavihara. And equanimity in that framework is supported by the other three: metta, compassion, appreciative joy. So when things are as they are, feels so challenging and I can't be with it, it can be a great moment to bring some balance, a moment of compassion. May I care for how hard this is, this grief, this fear, this world. Or we can appreciate the simple joys, right? A meal, a full moon, petting your cat. It's maybe not the full coolness of equanimity. I'm totally okay, whatever happens, but it does bring the uplift of that gentle appreciation. And I also just wanted to kind of hold and remember that we're not alone in this. We have each other, and we can bring right into our practice all of the people who have practiced with equanimity and continue to practice with it in trying times, right? Cooling the fires of reactivity and preference and attachment. I think a lot of Thich Nhat Hanh in these times and his experiences living through the Vietnam War, and that he was practicing equanimity, and I'm sure was practicing with his version of no and resistance inside to that and how things were. And so that gives me heart, right? He could do it, and we can too. And so we can play with this question, right? How narrow a bandwidth does our peace depend on? Can we imagine a relationship to all that is here that really is rooted in wisdom, knows the nature of all conditioned things is to come and go? That when we lean on things that are impermanent, it's really hard. We suffer because they're unreliable. And so this practice, I think, is so worthy of our time. And I'm excited to be in it with you all for these coming months. So thank you so much. Mm. Let's just really gently transition to practice. It's good to see people already moving. You're welcome to stand, stretch, maybe a couple deeper breaths. I find it sometimes hard to shift quickly from the kind of taking in of information to the slowing down and bringing the attention back to the body and breath. And so give yourself a little bit of time for that and just see what might be needed. Be a little opening of the chest or a swaying of the torso to find some balance with the sit bones. And to sense the spine rooted down, but also lengthening up. As much room as possible to breathe. And the hands can rest. They can rest on the lap or perhaps on the thighs. And face up can be a little more open, right? And Face down sometimes helpful when we just need to steady. And as it feels right, just let yourself receive the sensations of the body, your body as it is now, and the sensations of the breath. Just really gently seeing what you notice there. Maybe notice how your energy is in this moment. And the general tenor or energy of the mind, however it is. It's scattered or calm, open, or feeling kind of rigid. If it's here in this moment, with this moment as it moves, or maybe if it's anticipating or planning for the future, or replaying something from earlier in the day or week. And see if it's possible to kindly notice whatever's happening. Maybe that phrase, things are as they are, is an anchor that you want to experiment with today. Perhaps you're really wanting to stay with the breath or sounds or metta phrases to really feel the warmth of the heart. Same, right? Even with what we choose as our anchor, none better or worse. Breathing, sitting, giving yourself permission to arrive in each moment. See if it's possible to be gentle with yourself. And sometimes the phrase, just this much, just this much, just this moment of the in-breath, or just the very beginning of a thought or sensation. And we relate to that just that much with an understanding of its nature. As soon as the in-breath or the thought begins, as soon as it arises, it's passing. It's so out of our control. It's so impossible to separate from everything else. Seeing what it's like to be with that. Noticing when the stickiness of preference comes in, what that feels like.